Welcome to Tidbit Takeaways History Podcasts. Today we're diving into the rich and diverse history of Canada, a land shaped by Indigenous cultures, European exploration, and multiculturalism. Join us as we uncover the fascinating stories and pivotal moments that have defined this vast and beautiful country. Canada's history is deeply rooted in the diverse cultures and traditions of its Indigenous peoples, who have inhabited the land for thousands of years. Before the arrival of Europeans, Indigenous nations thrived across the continent, each with its own unique language, governance systems, and spiritual beliefs. These cultures were deeply connected to the land, with many Indigenous peoples living nomadic lifestyles or establishing permanent settlements based on their deep understanding of the natural environment. Indigenous societies were rich in art, music, and oral traditions, with storytelling playing a crucial role in passing down knowledge and history from one generation to the next. The First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples each had distinct cultural practices and ways of life, shaped by their environment and experiences. The arrival of Europeans brought significant changes to Indigenous societies, including the introduction of new diseases, trade goods, and technologies. European colonization also led to conflicts over land and resources, resulting in the displacement and marginalization of Indigenous peoples. Despite these challenges, Indigenous cultures have endured and continue to play a vital role in shaping Canada's identity. In the 15th century, European explorers such as Jacques Cartier and Samuel de Champlain began mapping the coastlines of Canada and establishing early settlements. These explorers were driven by a desire to find new trade routes and expand their empires, leading to increased interactions with Indigenous peoples. The fur trade emerged as a key economic activity, with European traders establishing trading posts and forming alliances with Indigenous nations to exchange furs for European goods. This trade had profound effects on Indigenous societies, transforming their economies and social structures. European colonization of Canada accelerated in the 17th and 18th centuries, as French and British settlers established permanent settlements and competed for control of key territories. The French established colonies in present-day Quebec and the Maritimes, while the British controlled territories along the Atlantic coast and Hudson Bay. The competition between France and Britain for control of North America culminated in the 7 Years' War, which were the years 1756 through 1763, in which the British ultimately emerged victorious. The Treaty of Paris in 1763 formally ceded New France to Britain, marking the beginning of British rule in Canada. British colonization brought significant changes to Canada, including the introduction of British law, governance systems, and cultural practices. It also led to the displacement and marginalization of Indigenous peoples, as European settlers sought to assert control over the land. Despite these challenges, Indigenous cultures have persisted and continue to play a vital role in Canada's cultural landscape. The legacy of European exploration and colonization remains a complex and multifaceted part of Canada's history, shaping the country's identity and relationships with Indigenous peoples to this day. The fur trade played a central role in shaping Indigenous-European relations in Canada. Indigenous peoples had been trading furs among themselves for centuries, but the arrival of European traders in the 16th century transformed the trade into a global enterprise. The fur trade was driven by the demand for beaver pelts, which were highly prized in Europe for making felt hats. Indigenous peoples, particularly those in the interior regions of Canada, became key suppliers of beaver pelts to European traders. The fur trade had profound effects on Indigenous societies. It altered traditional hunting patterns, as Indigenous peoples began to focus more on trapping animals for their fur. It also led to the development of new trade networks and alliances among Indigenous nations, as they competed for access to European goods. At the same time, the fur trade brought devastating consequences for Indigenous peoples. The spread of European diseases, such as smallpox and influenza, decimated Indigenous populations, making them more vulnerable to exploitation and colonization. Despite these challenges, the fur trade also created opportunities for Indigenous peoples to assert their sovereignty and negotiate with European traders on their own terms. Many Indigenous nations developed close relationships with European traders, often intermarrying and forming alliances that shaped the course of Canadian history. Overall, the fur trade was a complex and multifaceted phenomenon that had lasting effects on Indigenous European relations in Canada. It was a key driver of exploration and colonization, but it also had profound social, economic, and cultural impacts on Indigenous societies that continue to be felt to this day. Following the 7 Years' War, Britain gained control of Canada, ushering in a new era of British rule. The British government sought to assert its authority over its newly acquired territories, leading to tensions with the French-speaking population of Quebec. To address these tensions, the British government passed the Quebec Act in 1774, which guaranteed the rights of French Canadians to practice their religion and maintain their legal system. This act helped to stabilize the region and laid the foundation for the future province of Quebec. The American Revolution in the late 18th century had a significant impact on Canada. Loyalists who remained loyal to the British Crown fled to Canada, settling in areas such as Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, and Ontario. This influx of loyalists helped to solidify British control over these regions and laid the groundwork for the establishment of English-speaking colonies. In 1867, the British North America Act was passed, uniting the colonies of Canada, Nova Scotia, and New Brunswick into the Dominion of Canada. This act established a federal system of government, with powers divided between the federal government and the provinces. The creation of Canada as a self-governing dominion marked a significant milestone in its history, as it signaled the beginning of a new era of Canadian autonomy. Canada continued to expand westward, with the acquisition of Rupert's Land and the Northwestern Territory in 1870, and the completion of the Canadian Pacific Railway in 1885, which connected the country from coast to coast. Despite these advancements, Canada continued to face challenges, including tensions between English and French-speaking Canadians, Indigenous land claims, and economic struggles. However, the country's commitment to diversity, inclusivity, and social justice has helped it to overcome these challenges and emerge as a modern, multicultural nation. The British North America Act of 1867, which united the colonies of Canada, Nova Scotia, and New Brunswick into the Dominion of Canada, marked the beginning of a new chapter in Canadian history. Confederation allowed for the creation of a federal system of government, with powers divided between the federal government and the provinces. In the years following Confederation, Canada underwent rapid expansion and development. The completion of the Canadian Pacific Railway in 1885 connected the country from coast to coast, facilitating the movement of goods and people across the vast expanse of the country. Canada's population also grew rapidly during this time, fueled by immigration from Europe and Asia. Immigrants were drawn to Canada by the promise of land, economic opportunity, and freedom from political and religious persecution. As Canada expanded westward, it encountered challenges, including conflicts with Indigenous peoples over land rights and the impact of European diseases on Indigenous populations. The government sought to address these challenges through treaties and negotiations, but tensions persisted. Despite these challenges, Canada continued to prosper, fueled by its rich natural resources and a growing economy. The country became known for its commitment to social welfare, with the introduction of social programs such as universal health care and old age pensions. By the early 20th century, Canada had emerged as a prosperous and progressive nation, with a strong economy, a stable government, and a commitment to social justice. The country's commitment to diversity, inclusivity, and multiculturalism has helped it to thrive in an ever-changing world, solidifying its place as a leader on the global stage. The 20th century brought both challenges and achievements to Canada. The country played a significant role in both world wars, contributing troops and resources to the Allied cause. The sacrifices made by Canadians during these conflicts helped to shape the country's identity and its commitment to peacekeeping and international cooperation. The Great Depression of the 1930s hit Canada hard, leading to widespread unemployment and economic hardship. The government responded with a series of relief measures and social programs, laying the groundwork for the modern welfare state. World War II brought economic growth and industrialization to Canada, as the country mobilized its economy to support the war effort. After the war, Canada experienced a period of prosperity and expansion, fueled by post-war reconstruction and the baby boom. The latter half of the 20th century saw significant social and cultural changes in Canada. The country embraced multiculturalism as an official policy, recognizing the contributions of diverse ethnic and cultural groups to Canadian society. This commitment to diversity has helped to shape Canada's identity as a tolerant and inclusive nation. Canada also made significant strides in social justice and human rights during this time. The country was at the forefront of movements for women's rights, Indigenous rights, and LGBTQ rights, enacting legislation to protect and promote these rights. In the latter part of the 20th century, Canada faced challenges such as separatist movements in Quebec and economic recessions. However, the country emerged stronger and more resilient, reaffirming its commitment to democracy, diversity, and social justice. Today, Canada is known for its strong economy, high standard of living, and commitment to multiculturalism and social welfare. The country continues to face challenges, including environmental issues, Indigenous reconciliation, and economic inequality, but its history of resilience and innovation positions it well to tackle these challenges and continue to thrive in the 21st century. As Canada entered the 21st century, it faced a new set of challenges and opportunities. The country continued to evolve as a multicultural society, with immigration playing a key role in shaping its demographics and cultural landscape. Canada's economy became increasingly diversified, with growth in sectors such as technology, finance, and natural resources. The country also continued to prioritize social welfare, with universal healthcare and social programs that aim to reduce inequality and improve quality of life for all Canadians. One of the defining issues of the 21st century for Canada has been reconciliation with Indigenous peoples. The country has grappled with its colonial past and the legacy of residential schools, seeking to address historical injustices and build a more equitable relationship with Indigenous communities. Canada has also emerged as a leader in environmental stewardship, with a commitment to combating climate change and protecting its natural landscapes. The country has invested in renewable energy and sustainable practices, aiming to reduce its carbon footprint and preserve its natural heritage for future generations. In recent years, Canada has faced new challenges, including the COVID-19 pandemic, which has tested the country's healthcare system and economy. The government has implemented measures to support individuals and businesses affected by the pandemic, demonstrating its commitment to the well-being of its citizens. Looking ahead, Canada continues to strive for a more inclusive, sustainable, and prosperous future. The country's commitment to diversity, social justice, and environmental sustainability positions it well to navigate the challenges of the 21st century and continue to be a model for progressive governance and inclusive society. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Echoes of the Past. We hope our exploration of Canada's history has left you intrigued and inspired to learn more. Join us next time on Tidbit Takeaways as we continue to unravel the fascinating stories that have shaped our world. Until then, stay curious, keep discovering, and remember to appreciate the unique stories that make Canada's history so captivating.